Do you remember those African-American pies only your grandparents knew? They carried the taste of love, history, and home in every bite. What happens when the recipes that shaped us are forgotten? Potato custard pie was the gentler cousin of sweet potato pie, smooth as velvet and softly spiced. It was often made when yams were scarce or too costly, using humble white potatoes that transformed under Grandma's steady hand. The secret was in the slow simmering, boiled, mashed, and folded with eggs, milk, and nutmeg until it tasted richer than it had any right to. Its sweetness was light, less bold than its yam-made cousin, but its comfort ran deep. On cool Sunday afternoons or Christmas evenings, that pie came out warm from the oven, its custard trembling just a little, the scent of cinnamon and baked crust filling every corner of the house. It was the taste of making do, of turning little into enough, of stretching blessings without complaint. Some called it poor man's pie, but in those kitchens it was simply love in a crust. The texture was soft as memory, melting on the tongue with a sweetness that lingered. Families would slice it in silence at first, savoring that moment of peace before laughter returned. It was humble, yes, but it carried pride, a pie made not from plenty, but from faith in what could be created with care. Muscle shoals. Lemon icebox pie was sunshine caught in a dish. Down in Alabama kitchens, where summers stretched long and fans spun slow, that chilled pie was a kind of salvation. It was made with sweetened condensed milk, fresh lemons squeezed till your hands smelled like brightness, and a graham cracker crust pressed with the back of a spoon. Iceboxes hummed in porches and pantries, keeping this tart treasure cool for Sunday dinners. The filling was smooth, tangy, and cool against the tongue, like the first breath of air after a storm. No oven, no fuss, just Southern grace in every slice. It was the dessert that waited quietly while families sang, prayed, and laughed through the heat, its chill promising comfort after long days of labor. The first bite was always the same, eyes closed, smile wide, heart at peace. The lemon scent lingered long after the pie was gone, sharp but soothing, like sunlight filtered through lace curtains. That balance of sweet and sour mirrored life itself, bright, fleeting, but always worth savoring. Cornmeal crust blackberry pie was the kind of dessert that came from field and memory alike. It had the sturdy heart of a cobbler, but the formality of a pie, baked in cast iron with coarse cornmeal giving its crust a rustic crunch. Blackberries, wild and stubborn, were gathered from fence lines and forest edges, their juice staining palms purple. When mixed with sugar and spooned into that golden crust, they bubbled up like dark jewels, thick and fragrant. Each bite crackled slightly, the cornmeal adding grit and grit adding soul. This pie tasted of labor and laughter, of barefoot summers and calloused hands. It was never perfect, but it was always right, rich, tart, and rooted in the land itself. The crust browned deeply, the edges crisped just enough to break beneath the fork with a satisfying snap. The berries left trails of violet syrup across the plate, too beautiful to waste. It was the flavor of homegrown joy, of freedom baked into sweetness. Shoofly pie was born from Pennsylvania traditions, but made its way into African-American kitchens through migration. Made with molasses and a crumbly topping, the pie had a strong, sweet flavor that lingered with every bite. It was inexpensive to bake and filled bellies at a time when many families could not afford fancy ingredients. By the mid-20th century, Shoofly pie became a familiar sight at church events, bridging cultural influences in a uniquely American way. For civil rights-era families, it symbolized how traditions moved with people, carrying roots from one region into another. Its sticky sweetness reminded children of holidays, while adults saw it as proof that nothing was wasted, not even humble syrup. This pie was never about luxury, but it spoke volumes about resilience and resourcefulness. Shoofly pie proved that desserts could travel just like people, picking up new meanings while still offering comfort across generations. Brown sugar pie was pure alchemy, a dessert that took one humble ingredient and spun it into gold. It was syrupy, rich, and deeply sweet, with caramel tones that clung to your tongue long after the last bite. Born from necessity, it came alive when molasses ran out and pantry shelves ran low. A simple mix of sugar, butter, eggs, and cream created something impossibly decadent. The surface baked into a glassy top that cracked softly under a spoon, revealing a silky, molten center. It was the taste of thrift turned into luxury, of hard times sweetened by ingenuity. No one needed a recipe, just memory, intuition, and a steady hand. The pie was thick, honest, and golden brown, a testament to the magic that happened when warmth met sugar. It carried no pretense, no decoration, just comfort baked to perfection. It was the flavor of making do, of creating abundance where there was none, and finding joy in every rich amber bite. Vinegar pie was one of those clever creations born out of necessity, especially during the Depression when ingredients like lemons were hard to find. African American families embraced it as a way to create something sweet and tangy when the pantry seemed bare. The filling used simple staples: sugar, butter, eggs, and a splash of vinegar to mimic the tartness of fruit pies. Baked in a flaky crust, the result was a custard-like dessert with a surprising flavor that balanced richness with tang. It became a common treat at Sunday tables and special occasions, showing how creativity could transform scarcity into something memorable. The pie symbolized resilience, proving that a lack of fancy ingredients did not mean going without dessert. It was also a way of teaching younger generations about resourcefulness, turning what little you had into something worth sharing. Though many people today may raise eyebrows at the thought of vinegar in a pie, those who remember it know it carried warmth and pride. It was not just about taste, but about making the best of hard times. Few pies capture that kind of story anymore, which makes vinegar pie truly unforgettable. Buttered rum pie was the warmth of celebration baked in liquid gold. Along the southern coast, where rum flowed easily from ports and trade ships, families learned to fold its sweetness into desserts that carried both comfort and cheer. Butter, brown sugar, and cream simmered together before being whisked into eggs and baked until the pie trembled with richness. The rum gave it a slow heat that lingered long after the first bite, warming both the body and the heart. It was a holiday pie, a Christmas treat shared after songs and suppers, when laughter filled every corner of the house. The crust flaked like pastry snow beneath the heavy filling, and the scent of buttered rum floated through the air like memory itself. Buttered rum pie was the taste of gathering and gratitude, of families finding joy even when the year had been unkind. It was sweet, slow, and soulful, a reminder that the simplest ingredients could still make something grand. Transparent pie was a specialty that once filled Black Southern kitchens, a simple but striking dessert with a history tied to Kentucky roots. Made from butter, eggs, sugar, and cream, it created a clear, custard-like filling that shone under its golden crust. African American families made it for gatherings and church suppers, where its sweetness satisfied without the need for expensive ingredients. The pie's simplicity made it accessible, but its glossy, translucent center gave it a touch of elegance that set it apart. It was a recipe passed down through generations, often remembered only by those who grew up watching their elders whisk the filling together. Transparent pie carried the essence of thrift, turning staples into something that looked far more impressive than it cost. Its taste was rich, smooth, and satisfying, a blend of creaminess and sweetness that lingered long after the last bite. Though it has nearly vanished from modern cookbooks and tables, transparent pie remains one of those hidden gems of the past. Remembering it is like opening a window into kitchens where cleverness and tradition created desserts that truly stood the test of time. Sweet corn pie blurred the line between supper and dessert, between what was needed and what was loved. Made from fresh summer corn shaved carefully off the cob, it baked into a custard that was creamy, golden, and kissed with the taste of sunlight. A little sugar, a little butter, and the faint crunch of the corn made each bite both hearty and gentle. Families in the country served it with whatever they had, sometimes greens, sometimes beans, sometimes nothing at all, but grace. It filled bellies and hearts, a quiet celebration of the harvest that never failed to come. Sweet corn pie reminded everyone that sweetness could come from the soil, not the store, from hands that planted rather than purchased. It smelled like the end of summer and the promise of full barns. It was the kind of dish that made even an empty table feel abundant. Each spoonful carried a lesson in gratitude that even the simplest things could be enough. Sweet corn pie was a hymn of plenty, sung softly from stove to table, a reminder that the earth always gave more than it took. Coconut custard pie was once a staple at church potlucks and family reunions, where its creamy texture and tropical flavor stood out among other desserts. African-American cooks blended eggs, milk, sugar, and shredded coconut to make a custard filling that baked into a golden, fragrant pie. The coconut added both sweetness and texture, turning a simple custard into something memorable. It was often served in generous slices, paired with coffee or sweet tea after a hearty meal. Coconut custard pie symbolized celebration, reminding everyone that even the simplest ingredients could feel indulgent when made with care. Families often guarded their recipes closely, adding small twists like nutmeg, lemon zest, or a splash of vanilla to make their version unique. Children often remembered it as the taste of church gatherings, where long tables were filled with home-baked desserts made with love. Today, coconut cream pies remain popular, but the custard version has nearly disappeared. Its absence leaves a quiet gap in cultural memory, even though it once stood proudly on countless tables. Coconut custard pie deserves to be remembered as one of the clever, cherished desserts no one makes anymore. Buttermilk chess pie was proof that simplicity could still feel like abundance. Made from eggs, sugar, butter, and a splash of tangy buttermilk, it baked into a soft, custard-like center with a golden, crackled top. It was rich, but not fancy, sweet, but with just enough edge to keep it honest. Every Southern kitchen had its own version. Some added cornmeal for texture, others a dash of vinegar for balance. It was the kind of dessert you made without a recipe because you already knew how it should feel in your hands. The scent of buttermilk chess pie filled kitchens after Sunday service, where laughter, gospel, and good food met. It spoke of fellowship, of tables crowded with stories and second helpings. It did not need adornment. No whipped cream, no garnish, no show, just a pie tin, a warm oven, and faith that it would come together. Buttermilk chess pie became the symbol of contentment in hard times, its sweetness grounded in gratitude. It was comfort baked into tradition, familiar enough to feel like home no matter where life carried you. One bite, and you remembered everything good that endures. Cornmeal pie was as humble as the hands that mixed it. Made from cornmeal, milk, butter, and sugar, it straddled the line between bread and dessert, rich enough for company, but plain enough for every day. The batter baked into a golden, lightly gritty filling with a crisp crust and a smooth center. It was a pie that didn't pretend to be anything else, and that was its charm. Cornmeal pie turned a farm staple into something indulgent without waste or excess. Families ate it warm from the oven, topped with a drizzle of sorghum or a spoonful of cream if they had it. It was simple food made sacred by tradition. Cornmeal pie tasted of hearth and patience, of quiet evenings when sweetness was rare and shared sparingly. It carried the soul of the South, resourceful, honest, and proud. Every bite told a story of survival through creativity, of making do and making joy. Cornmeal pie was the dessert that didn't need celebration to matter. It was celebration enough by itself. Water pie was one of the cleverest Depression-era inventions, proving dessert could still be made when cupboards were bare. African-American families mixed water, sugar, flour, and butter in a crust, baking until it thickened into a soft, custard-like filling. The taste was surprisingly sweet and creamy, making it feel like more than the sum of its parts. Families valued it not just for flavor, but for what it represented: resilience and resourcefulness in the hardest years. It showed that joy could be found even when money and supplies were scarce. Its simplicity made it accessible, a dessert almost anyone could prepare. Today, water pie has nearly disappeared, but it remains a reminder of how kitchens stretched every scrap to keep spirits lifted. For those who remember, it was more than a recipe. It was proof of hope baked into every slice, a clever way of turning almost nothing into comfort. Sweet potato custard pie was the gentler cousin of the famous sweet potato pie, softer, silkier, and quieter in its sweetness. The filling was made from freshly mashed sweet potatoes, rich farm eggs, sugar, milk, and a whisper of nutmeg. Slow baking turned it into something that barely held its shape, trembling with warmth and memory. The flavor was delicate but deep, caramel, vanilla, and earth all in harmony. Sweet potato custard pie was the dessert of holidays, revivals, and reunions, its orange glow bright as autumn sunlight. It reminded people of family kitchens filled with chatter, of gardens where the roots came from, of hands that stirred without measuring. Every spoonful carried the taste of love turned practical, nothing wasted, everything treasured. It was a pie that spoke of the land, of patience, and of the people who made sweetness out of endurance. For many, it was the first dessert they learned to bake and the last one they ever forgot. Sweet potato custard pie was heritage made edible, tender, golden, and rooted in resilience. Buttermilk pie was a simple yet rich creation that became a fixture at family gatherings and Sunday dinners. Made from basic staples like eggs, sugar, butter, and tangy buttermilk, it baked into a creamy custard filling with a lightly golden crust. African American households valued it for its reliability, since the ingredients were nearly always available in the pantry or fridge. The flavor was balanced, slightly tart, but mostly sweet, with a smooth texture that seemed fancier than its humble origins. Grandmothers often pulled one from the oven just before guests arrived, letting it cool on the table to signal celebration. Each family had their own small twist, sometimes adding lemon zest, nutmeg, or vanilla to deepen the flavor. Buttermilk pie was also practical because it kept well, allowing leftovers to be enjoyed for days. Served warm or chilled, it always carried a sense of comfort and tradition. Today, it has been overshadowed by flashier desserts, but its quiet richness tells the story of kitchens where love and thrift created something enduring. Molasses pie was the dark sweetness of endurance baked into a crust. When sugar was rare and luxury was far away, molasses, thick, rich, and smoky, became the backbone of Southern desserts. Families used sorghum or blackstrap, whisking it into eggs, flour, and a touch of milk until it baked into a filling that shimmered like old amber. Each slice was deep with flavor, part caramel, part earth, and part memory. It was a pie that didn't need frills or fruit, just time and faith that it would set right. The smell filled cabins and farmhouses with the scent of something sweet, earned through hard work. Molasses pie reminded people of their connection to the land, to the cane fields, to the soil that gave both hardship and life. It was a dessert made to last, rich enough to feel like celebration even in times of scarcity. For many Black families in the South, it became a holiday standard, eaten slowly with coffee or milk, enjoyed long after supper had ended. Molasses pie was the kind of comfort that did not fade quickly, a flavor that stayed long after the last bite, heavy with history and warmth. Oatmeal pie was a thrifty answer to shortages, especially when pecans were too expensive for families to afford. African American cooks blended oats with sugar, eggs, and syrup, baking it into a pie that looked and tasted surprisingly close to pecan pie. The oats gave texture, while the syrup created a sweet, gooey filling beneath a golden crust. Families valued it because it allowed them to enjoy something rich and festive without the cost of nuts. Oatmeal pie was often baked for holidays or Sunday dinners, where it satisfied cravings for indulgence on a modest budget. It was also proof of kitchen ingenuity, showing how substitutes could create new traditions. The pie became tied to resourcefulness, reminding families that celebration did not depend on luxury. Served warm, it was comforting and filling, its sweetness softened by the heartiness of oats. Today it has slipped into obscurity, yet it remains a clever reminder of how African American households created joy even in the hardest times. Peanut butter pie was born from the Southern soil itself, from the farmers, the harvests, and the humble peanut that changed everything. The filling was creamy, rich, and slightly salty, made from whipped peanut butter, sugar, and milk poured into a flaky crust. It was sweet but strong, a dessert that didn't need permission to stand out. During lean years, this pie meant protein and pride, a way to stretch what little you had into something worthy of Sunday. The taste was both comforting and bold, earthy from the peanuts, soft from the cream, and full of satisfaction. For many families, it became a sign that things were getting better, that there was enough again to make something special. Children licked the spoons clean while elders smiled, remembering harder times that had slowly turned gentle. Peanut butter pie was thrift turned to luxury, proof that the ground beneath your feet could give you both sustenance and sweetness. It was the South's quiet answer to hunger, humble, hearty, and home. Shoofly pie was a molasses-rich dessert that entered African-American kitchens through Southern foodways and quickly became part of tradition. Its filling of molasses, brown sugar, and crumbs baked into a dense, sweet custard that carried both depth and energy. Molasses was affordable and widely available, making the pie a practical treat for families with limited means. The flavor was bold, not delicate, with a strong sweetness balanced by the crumb topping that baked into a crisp layer. Shoofly pie was often served in thick slices with coffee, making it a favorite for gatherings or late afternoon treats. Families appreciated it not only for its taste but also for its thrift, since molasses stretched further than refined sugar. Over time, it became less common as tastes shifted and store-bought desserts took over. Yet for those who remember it, Shoofly pie is tied to memory and heritage, carrying the richness of the past in every bite. It remains one of those clever recipes that deserves to be remembered. Sorghum cream pie was the taste of the fields turned into dessert. Sorghum, that thick amber syrup born from cane presses and long afternoons, sweetened a custard rich with eggs and milk. The pie baked smooth, glossy, and full of depth, smoky, molasses-like, with a sweetness that lingered long after the bite was gone. It was the kind of pie that spoke softly but stayed with you, reminding you of harvests, hard work, and the slow rhythm of country life. Families who grew sorghum by hand took pride in its flavor, knowing it was their labor poured into every spoonful. Sorghum cream pie was more than dessert. It was legacy, the sweet echo of self-reliance and endurance. It connected generations through flavor, from enslaved field hands to freed farmers to grandchildren tasting history at the supper table. It reminded everyone that sweetness earned was sweetness remembered. Sorghum cream pie was not just food, it was testimony, baked golden and still warm with truth. Chess pie was a sugary custard pie that once held pride of place in Southern kitchens, including many African-American households. Its filling was made from butter, eggs, sugar, and cornmeal, which gave it a slightly grainy texture that set it apart from other pies. The result was a dense, sweet dessert with a caramel-like flavor that lingered on the tongue. Families appreciated it for its simplicity, since all the ingredients were affordable and shelf-stable, making it easy to whip up at a moment's notice. Chess pie was often baked for church suppers, holiday tables, and neighborhood gatherings, where a single pie could be sliced into small but satisfying portions. It represented the ingenuity of cooks who elevated plain ingredients into something beloved. Though recipes still exist in cookbooks, it has quietly faded from everyday tables, replaced by store-bought sweets. Those who remember it recall its sweetness with fondness, tied to voices of mothers and grandmothers serving it with pride. Chess pie was once more than dessert. It was heritage baked into every slice. Prune pie was the dessert of endurance, sweetened by patience and the wisdom of those who made do. Dried prunes, softened with sugar, spice, and thyme, transformed into a dark, glossy filling rich with depth. Its flavor was mellow but confident, the taste of something built to last. Families baked it when fruit was scarce, when every bit of sweetness had to be earned. It filled kitchens with the scent of molasses and comfort, reminding everyone that sweetness could still be found in hard seasons. Soldiers carried it, travelers packed it, and mothers baked it to stretch what they had. Each slice was dense and velvety, proof that time itself could turn humble ingredients into something generous. Prune pie was more than dessert. It was a promise that even what seemed dried out could bloom again. Its flavor lingered, dark and soft, a quiet echo of perseverance. In every bite was a memory of thrift turned into tradition, of survival turned into sweetness. Pineapple meringue pie was the dream of abundance after years of none. Canned pineapple, a wartime import turned treasure, gave the custard its bright tropical taste and brought sunshine to tables that had long gone without. A cloud of whipped egg whites crowned it, browned gently under the broiler until it glistened like sugar glass. It looked like something from a hotel dining room, yet it was made from the simplest of rations, a luxury born from thrift. For Black families across the South, it became a Sunday centerpiece, served with pride and reverence, a symbol of how far they had come through struggle. The flavor was sweet, light, and golden, tasting of celebration more than sustenance. Pineapple meringue pie carried the taste of hope disguised as elegance, a reminder that joy could rise even from the plainest pantry. Children would wait for it to cool, sneaking spoons of filling when no one was watching, tasting the future in each bite. Every slice shimmered with gratitude, with triumph over scarcity. It was a pie that made hardship pause, if only for a meal, and reminded everyone that sweetness, when shared, was the purest kind of victory. Raisin chess pie was a way to make luxury out of what came cheap. Dried raisins, bought in bulk or traded in town, stretched a few eggs and sugar into something that tasted rich. The raisins melted slightly as the custard baked, leaving soft bursts of sweetness in every slice. It was a dessert that made the ordinary feel like a feast, its golden top cracking under the first warm bite. Families served it after church, proud to offer something sweet even in lean months. Raisin chess pie was proof that thrift and love could make anything taste better. It turned scarcity into celebration, each piece a reminder that dessert was never about what you had, but how you used it. The flavor lingered like memory itself, humble, warm, and deeply Southern. Cane syrup pie was as thick and sweet as the Louisiana air. The syrup, pressed from sugarcane fields worked by hand, gave the filling its deep amber glow. Mixed with eggs, butter, and a touch of spice, it baked into a glossy, heavy custard that clung to the fork like honey. One slice filled you up, body and spirit both. The flavor was bold, smoky, and rooted in the land itself. Cane syrup pie told the story of workers who grew sweetness from sweat, of families who turned labor into comfort. It was a pie that demanded patience, slow to pour, slow to bake, and worth every minute. On holidays, it took the center of the table, rich as gold. Cane syrup pie was the South's sweetest victory, proof that joy could still rise from the soil. Green tomato pie was proof that waste was never an option. When frost threatened to ruin the last of the garden, cooks gathered firm, unripe tomatoes and treated them like fruit. Sliced thin and tossed with sugar, cinnamon, and a touch of vinegar, they baked into a pie that looked strange but tasted like revelation. The tartness of the tomatoes balanced beautifully against the spice, creating a dessert both unexpected and irresistible. Green tomato pie turned survival into surprise, using what was left to make what was loved. Families served it proudly, knowing it told a story of ingenuity and heart. It was the kind of recipe whispered between neighbors, passed down without written words, but with quiet reverence. The first bite confused the tongue, part apple, part citrus, all comfort. It was a lesson in gratitude and creativity, a reminder that scarcity could still yield wonder. Green tomato pie was the art of making do and doing it beautifully. Blackberry hand pies were the taste of summer caught between crusts. Children and grandparents picked the berries along fences and forest edges, their fingers stained purple by sunset. The filling bubbled with sugar and wild fruit, wrapped in lard pastry that fried crisp and golden in cast-iron pans. These pies were small enough to hold, perfect for workers in the fields or travelers on long roads. Each bite was sweet and sharp, full of thorns and sunlight, proof that nature still gave freely. Blackberries did not need tending, they just needed gathering, and that made these pies a blessing. They cooled on windowsills, wrapped in cloth, and disappeared before morning. Blackberry hand pies were love-made portable, dessert for people who could not afford rest but still found joy in a handful of dough and fruit. They were the South's sweetest rebellion against hunger. Apple cider vinegar pie carried the taste of autumn long after apples were gone. When the barrels were empty and fruit was too costly, vinegar stood in for the tang of cider. Mixed with syrup, butter, and flour, it baked into a custard smooth as caramel with a bright, lingering bite. It fooled guests into thinking apples had been used, and even after they learned the truth, they kept asking for seconds. The pie was humble in appearance but full of warmth, the kind that pulled families close around the table. It spoke of making do without complaint, of turning what was sour into something worth savoring. Apple cider vinegar pie was a quiet masterpiece of survival, tart, golden, and honest. Its sweetness came not from sugar alone, but from gratitude, patience, and the hands that refused to waste a thing. Pumpkin molasses. Pie was the deep, spiced heart of the harvest table. Pumpkins were mashed soft, mixed with molasses, and scented with cloves, cinnamon, and ginger. The molasses gave it a darker sweetness than sugar ever could, heavy with the echo of African fields and southern farms. It was a pie that spoke across generations, carrying flavors that tied freedom and survival together. The filling shimmered like bronze under the oven light, and its smell filled the air with warmth that felt almost sacred. Pumpkin molasses pie was eaten slowly, reverently, with thanks for the land and the labor that made it. It was both food and remembrance, a story baked into every slice. Sweet, earthy, and spiced with soul, it was more than dessert. It was heritage. Vinegar pie was the miracle no one saw coming. Born out of scarcity, it turned the simplest pantry staples into something unexpectedly elegant. When lemons were too costly or unavailable, vinegar stepped in, its sharpness softened by sugar and butter until it became a tangy custard pie, unlike anything else. African-American cooks perfected this balance between frugality and flavor, making do without ever losing touch with creativity. The first bite was sweet, then bright, then comforting, the kind of taste that made you pause just to appreciate it. Vinegar pie was proof that the best recipes often come from necessity, not abundance. During Christmas, when families stretched every dollar and every ingredient, this pie brought a sense of pride and accomplishment. It didn't glitter like a fancy dessert, but it didn't need to. It was a triumph in disguise, a humble, golden masterpiece born from ingenuity. Homemade eggnog with nutmeg was Christmas comfort poured into glass cups. Families whisked eggs, milk, and sugar by hand until the mixture turned thick and creamy. Condensed milk gave it sweetness, a pinch of nutmeg gave it soul, and sometimes a secret splash of brandy gave it warmth. It chilled in the fridge overnight, waiting for laughter to fill the room. Elders sipped slowly while children begged for more foam. The first sip burned just slightly, smooth and rich, like velvet on the tongue. No carton could ever compare. It was the taste of patience and pride. The smell of nutmeg alone meant Christmas had arrived, wrapping the air in nostalgia. Every family guarded their version, written nowhere but remembered perfectly. Collard green sandwiches were a resourceful way to fill plates when meat was out of reach. Cooked greens, seasoned with fatback or drippings if available, were pressed between slices of cornbread to make a humble but hearty meal. This simple sandwich was portable, filling, and affordable, making it a dependable choice for families stretched thin by segregation and poverty. Children carried them to school or work in lunch pails, where they stood as proof of both ingenuity and resilience. Housewives leaned on collards because they grew well, even in poor soil, and cornbread was a staple in every kitchen. Together, they created something greater than their parts, nourishing bodies and spirits alike. These sandwiches were not glamorous, but they filled stomachs and carried families through hard days. Though rarely remembered now, collard green sandwiches once reflected a culture of survival, turning two of the humblest foods into a powerful statement of endurance and self-reliance against every hardship imposed. Baked macaroni pie was where comfort met celebration. Unlike its modern boxed cousin, this dish was rich, homemade and soulful. Layers of tender pasta held together by eggs, milk, and sharp cheddar cheese. African American families treated it as more than a side. It was a centerpiece of holiday tables. The top baked to a perfect crust, golden and bubbling, while the inside stayed creamy and soft. Every bite carried the flavor of home, of effort, and pride. Long before convenience foods arrived, this was what macaroni and cheese meant, a dish born from community cookbooks, perfected in cast-iron pans. Children waited eagerly for the first cut, watching the steam rise as it hit the cool December air. The smell filled the room, mingling with baked ham, greens, and sweet yams, forming the true symphony of Christmas dinner. Baked macaroni pie was more than sustenance. It was identity. It told a story of creativity born from scarcity, of making something extraordinary from what you had. That first creamy, cheesy forkful said everything about love that words couldn't. Sorrel punch cake was the meeting of islands and America on one holiday table. The red petals of dried sorrel, hibiscus, were steeped into syrup, spiced with ginger and clove, and folded into a rich batter that turned the cake a deep crimson. For many African American families with Caribbean roots, this dessert was more than flavor. It was identity. It carried the tang of hibiscus, the warmth of spice, and the memory of Christmases celebrated across oceans. The aroma was intoxicating, filling kitchens with a scent equal parts floral and fiery. Once baked, it was brushed with more sorrel syrup, glossy and fragrant, a dessert that glowed like ruby glass. Sorrel punch cake connected people to ancestors who had used the same ingredients in a different land for the same reason: to celebrate surviving another year. It was history in sugar and spice, and every bite reminded you that culture can travel far, but it never fades. Afro tree toppers stood as proud symbols of beauty, faith, and identity. Mothers molded angels with brown faces, coiled hair, and wings made from lace or fabric scraps. They painted each one by hand, giving them radiant smiles and halos cut from golden ribbon. Placed high atop trees, these angels shone under colored lights like guardians of joy. In a time when stores sold only pale-faced cherubs, these creations were quiet acts of love and defiance. Children looked up and saw themselves reflected in every feature, their pride glowing brighter than the lights below. Each year, the angel returned, sometimes patched, sometimes faded, but always cherished. It wasn't just decoration, it was representation made sacred. Neighbors admired them, guests asked where to buy one, but the answer was always the same: we made her. That truth gave the season its power. Those handmade angels transformed ordinary living rooms into spaces of dignity and belonging. Molasses and cornmeal coffee substitute was a hot drink that filled cups when real coffee was too expensive or unavailable. Families stirred cornmeal into water, sometimes roasting it first, and sweetened the brew with molasses to mimic the richness of coffee. It was far from perfect, but it offered warmth and energy on cold mornings. Adults drank it before heading into fields or factories, needing the comfort of something hot to start the day. Children sometimes sipped it too, enjoying the sweetness even if they missed the taste of real coffee. Housewives valued it because both molasses and cornmeal were inexpensive staples that could stretch endlessly. This drink was not just about flavor, but about dignity, providing the illusion of luxury when actual coffee was out of reach. Though few remember it now, molasses and cornmeal coffee substitute once symbolized perseverance, showing that even in the absence of comforts, families found ways to hold on to ritual and routine. Sweet potato biscuits brought sunshine to winter mornings. Their orange glow peeked from the oven, warm and soft with a buttery crust that crumbled at the touch. They were made from mashed sweet potatoes, one of the most treasured ingredients in African American kitchens, valued for their sweetness, their earthiness, and their ability to stretch a meal. On Christmas mornings, these biscuits were stacked high beside grits, eggs, or fried apples, brushed with melted butter or drizzled with honey. They smelled like the start of a good day. In times when sugar was scarce, The natural sweetness of the potato did all the work. Kneaded by hand and baked in cast-iron skillets, they carried the weight of care in every fold. Grandmothers taught children how to press the dough without overworking it, whispering small lessons about patience, family, and food as love. These biscuits weren't fancy, but they made every breakfast feel special. They were proof that beauty didn't need perfection, just heart, warmth, and a little time. Every batch was a promise that something good always waited at the table. Sweet potato biscuits didn't just feed families, they connected them. Caramel layer cake was the dessert that demanded patience and rewarded devotion. The caramel icing had to be stirred over low heat for what felt like forever, and the smell of sugar turning gold was pure heaven. One careless second, and it would burn. But when it came out right, it gleamed like amber. African American women guarded their caramel recipes like secrets, each one slightly different, perfected over decades of Christmas dinners. The cake itself was tender and buttery, but the icing was the soul of it, sweet, smoky, and just shy of bitter. Served on special occasions, it was a symbol of pride, proof that skill and care could turn a handful of ingredients into art. The first slice cut through the glossy top like glass, revealing soft layers that seemed to melt in the mouth. No factory-made dessert could ever match it. Caramel layer cake was love, labor, and legacy, all baked into one beautiful confection. Pokeberry wine, carefully made from foraged berries, was not just a drink, but a folk remedy tied to survival. The deep purple berries, toxic if mishandled, were boiled and strained, creating a liquid believed to ease pain and treat ailments. In communities with little access to doctors, such home cures became essential. Families passed down recipes through generations, each step carefully guarded to avoid harm while drawing out the plant's healing potential. Housewives prepared it in small batches, knowing it was meant more for medicine than pleasure. Some elders took small sips daily, swearing by its ability to ease arthritis or calm nerves. The drink symbolized ingenuity, proof that even the wild and dangerous could be turned into something useful with knowledge and care. Children were warned never to eat the berries raw, but they grew up knowing the wine's importance to family survival. Though science later questioned its effectiveness, pokeberry wine was once a lifeline born from tradition and necessity. Molasses pound cake was the kind of dessert that lived in memory long after the last crumb was gone. It was heavy in the hand, rich in flavor, and spiced with cinnamon, ginger, and cloves, made for cold evenings when the scent of baking was enough to warm the whole house. Molasses stood in for sugar when sugar was too dear, and it gave the cake its deep brown color and caramel soul. The batter, thick and fragrant, was poured into worn loaf pans that had seen a lifetime of holidays. When it emerged from the oven, the crust glistened, slightly sticky, like honey touched by smoke. African American families passed this recipe through generations, often written in fading ink on the backs of church bulletins or tucked inside cookbooks. It wasn't just dessert, it was preservation. The flavor was bold and comforting, sweet without being showy, a reflection of the people who made it. Served with a glass of milk or a drizzle of cream, it carried history in every bite. Molasses pound cake wasn't about extravagance, it was about memory, about keeping sweetness alive even when times were lean. In that way, it wasn't just cake, it was resilience baked golden. Peanut brittle crackled like glass when broken, a sound that always announced the start of Christmas. Sugar boiled on the stove until golden, and roasted peanuts were stirred in fast, the smell filling the kitchen with toasted sweetness. You needed courage to make it. Just a few seconds too long, and it would scorch beyond repair. But when it turned out right, it shone like amber, sweet and sharp all at once. Every Southern Black household had someone who made it best, someone whose brittle snapped perfectly between the teeth. It was candy made with heart and heat, meant to be shared from tins wrapped in ribbon. The pieces stuck to your fingers and sometimes your teeth, but that only made it better. Peanut brittle was a labor of love, born of resourcefulness and shared as generosity. It wasn't bought, it was earned. If even one of these pies brought back the taste of home, tell us which one your grandparents made, and remember to like, comment, and subscribe so their recipes and their stories keep living on.